Welcome to Level Replay for the week of the 18th to the 24th of March. So what is Level Replay? This is a show where we look at a game that came out this week 2 years ago. Unless there was no game this week 2 years ago, in which case, woo! So this week we are looking at the 18th to the 24th of March, and the game we're looking at is Crysis 2. Crysis 2 is a game developed by Crytek, a company which does tend to use Cry in almost everything they do. Far Cry, Crysis, Crytek, Crynet. I think they've got some obsession with crying or something. Crysis 2 was a game I did pick up not long after launch last time round. It was a game I bought for the PlayStation 3, which, looking back on it, was a bit of a mistake considering PSN went down not long after I actually bought it. So that was bad timing. I should also probably note that I have not played the original Crysis, and I have not played Crysis 3. Okay, so let's get started with the single player, and the story. Or as much as I can remember of the story, because it's very uninteresting, and it doesn't really explain itself that much. You keep getting all these words thrown at you, and it might just be because I didn't play the first game, but you don't really understand much of it. The only thing you really pick up on is that, oh, there's this cell group of people. They are trying to shoot you, kill you. Oh, there's also an infection and an alien invasion, and go to this route and whatnot and do whatever. You then have this opening cutscene where it blends live action and in-game visuals, and it doesn't really fit together all too well. One of the things that really killed the story for me was the protagonist, or I suppose in a way the lack of a protagonist. The reason is that the protagonist, the person you play as, Alcatraz, is a silent protagonist. Now I have no issue with silent protagonists in general. Some of the best protagonists are silent protagonists, Link, Gordon Freeman, but the circumstances in this game are different. Silent protagonists are used mainly as a blank slate, someone you can project yourself onto. You can't really do that with Alcatraz. This is partially because it's not something you're necessarily wanting to do. You're sort of being dragged along. It's not, oh, can you save Hyrule, rescue the princess and whatnot. It's not something, oh, okay, I'll do that, I'll save the world. It's more, oh, go this way. See this person, find him, help him, whatever. Do that. Why? You don't know why. What's the end goal? What am I doing? Where am I? And okay, maybe that would be not as bad, but it gets worse. The reason it's so bad is because there are several situations in the story that if you were there, you would say something. Heck, you almost get killed by an ally because he thought you were someone else. And you never said at any point, oh no, I'm not that guy who you've been thinking I was for the past half an hour while you were lecturing me on several things which I didn't know shit about. There is literally this whole entire monologue of him saying, oh, this person's related to this person who you know, and this is going on which you know about, and this, because he thinks you're a different character. He thinks you're this character called Prophet who effectively saved you at the end of the first level, and then probably killed himself. But you have tons of radio conversations and stuff with him, and there's no moment where the character goes and says, oh yeah, I'm not this guy, he wanted me to help you, he wanted me to find you. No. Instead, once you find him and he tells you about all this stuff for a while and he eventually finds out you're not who he is, he pulls a gun out on you. Maybe this would be okay if there was some sort of explanation as to, oh, you can't talk because you were shot several times in the first level. Spoilers for the first level, you were shot quite a bit. You might not be able to talk, I don't know, shot in the throat or something like that. But the problem with this theory is that there is a situation in the first level, right at the start of that, where your guy doesn't talk. Okay, it's more of a case of, oh, he doesn't need to talk, but it's still a situation where normally you'd expect the person to talk. And it's, oh, he's a bit out of it or something like that, and say you're still alive by nodding your head. You know, your standard, oh, this is how you move the camera at the beginning of the game. But it's still a situation where you would have talked, and for a silent protagonist, it's to project yourself onto. It makes you feel like you are the character. It's for immersion. What's being accomplished by this is the opposite. This is immersion breaking. But enough about the subpar story. Let's get on to other things. Now, with Crytek and their games in general, there's one thing you always expect from them, and that is good graphics. This looks pretty good for a console game. Does it have the graphical leaps and bounds that its predecessor had? No, but it still looks good. So let's talk about gameplay. So you're effectively a man in a super suit. Okay, so there are a couple of things you can do. You can, for instance, go invisible, and you've got this armor mode which can protect you from damage. Let's talk about armor mode first, because that's probably going to be quicker to get over. It's pretty standard. Effectively, while you're in this mode, protects you from damage. You can take a fair few bullets, certainly a lot more than when you're without armor mode on. So armor mode means you can last a bit longer in fighting. Invisibility is as you'd expect, you go invisible. There are, however, a few problems with invisibility. The biggest problem to me with the tactical approach of invisibility is the upgrade system. So there is an upgrade system where you can purchase upgrades for your cloak, your armor mode, a few detection things so you can tell where enemies are, what paths they're taking, stuff like that. Reduction in energy consumption of armor mode and invisibility and whatnot. Fine. But to purchase these, you need to effectively kill the aliens in this game, the Seth. The problem with this is that you need to kill them, and that means that to get upgrades, you're pretty much going to need to use the armor mode, not the invisibility. The technical approach with invisibility is going to be to sneak past them. So you're not going to get upgrades by using the stealth. Now, I suppose you could go invisible to get into a better place to then kill them. That's about as much good as it's going to do you for getting upgrades. Or if you're in a tight spot, perhaps, and you happen to have invisibility, well, some energy to use invisibility to then sneak away, perhaps it can help then. But in general, armor mode's going to be what you're going to use. So let's get on to the energy bar that you have on this game. Now this powers pretty much all but one of your suit's abilities. So a list of your suit's abilities that run on this energy bar. Nanovision, pretty helpful in darker places in the game. It basically shows up sort of like a heat vision thing, showing you where enemies are and everything like that. And it can be useful at times. It's not necessary really, but it does help. It doesn't drain much on the energy bar either. It's fairly low energy cost. I should probably explain the energy bar. The energy bar is sort of a percentage thing. It charges to 100. Wait a couple of seconds and it starts charging. It charges fairly quickly. Other things that run off it, your armor mode runs off it. It's fairly low use when you've got it active but not being shot at. Being shot when you have it on uses a fair bit more, but it lasts a little while, and armor mode's fairly useful. It's going to be a standard. Invisibility uses more when you move and stuff like that, but you're going to use invisibility when moving, and it doesn't last long while moving whatsoever. Your general approach with invisibility, and if you are trying to sneak at some points, will be to travel for short distances, try and find cover that's not far away that you can get behind, and then recharge again, and go from point to point. You can't really sneak for a long distance. Another thing that runs off it, your melee attacks run off it. Not much for just a single melee which isn't charged, that isn't your power melee. There are two types of melee in the game. If you tap it, it's going to be a, oh, you just punched. If you hold it, it's effectively a power melee, which is useful for sometimes you can kick cars, stuff like that. Not that it's really effective, but it's pretty cool. Problem with the power melee, however, is I think it uses all your power at once, which isn't helpful, especially if you muck up with it, because then you're all left without power and you're probably going to be killed. You do need to make sure you've got some energy pretty much at all times. Unless if you're undetected and behind cover, then you're fine. Now the reason I say is because that if you were, for example, in invisible mode, sneaking through a huge group of enemies, and then your cloak drops off because you don't have any energy anymore, you don't really have any way of getting out of there, because almost everything runs off this energy bar. The thing I haven't mentioned yet that runs off it is the sprint. Because if you're in such a situation that your invisibility runs out and you need to get out of there, you're going to want to sprint, but you can't because you don't have any energy left. It should also be noted that the invisibility, if you shoot while having it on will deplete all your energy straight there. You can use melee with it, do sort of stealth kills. Not that those work all the time, it seems. So, I mean, even the sprint bar working off this energy bar seems like a really stupid idea to me. It's really impractical if you want to move around the level quick. Why they couldn't have it running off its own separate thing, you can only use it for so long, I don't know. And I think from what I've heard, they've actually done that in Crysis 3. Now, the exception to this energy is tactical vision. Tactical vision, it's effectively sort of your binoculars. You can see where enemies are and everything like that. You can tag enemies, have them highlighted. It also highlights a few places where maybe you can do something. Such as, there's a tunnel you can sneak past all these guys with. There was one time where there was a cannon which you could fire at the enemies. You light the fuse, it fires, and it killed an enemy and distracted the others, which was pretty cool, but that was the only time I really saw it. Those moments are very few and far between, because most of the time it highlights resupply, which is just ammo. That's what it tends to highlight, and maybe that'd be okay if you actually ran out of ammo. One thing I found is that you never really run out of ammo. I think I ran out of ammo once. There are so many points at which there are ammo, just random ammo boxes lying about. Also, it should be noted with Nanovision that it actually still highlights ammo boxes for some reason. I don't know why. Are the ammo boxes somehow slightly alive? Were they alive at one point but now dead? Why do they highlight blue? They highlight the same as dead bodies. So I don't want to know what those ammo boxes are made out of. The other core bit of controlling your character which is a wee bit weird is the cover system for this game. It's sort of hard for me to explain it. It's got a weird feel to it. It's not a Gears of War-esque, you know, you completely lean out. You're not tied to the wall at all. From what I've read, there's sort of mixed opinions on it. It seems a real love it or hate it thing, with probably a bit more people hating it from the looks of it. And I'll probably put myself in that group. I don't particularly like it that much. I think it's better described with the video that's playing on. But one of the things about it is that it doesn't actually work on all cover. It's what the game decides is cover. So some places where you think you might be able to use it, no. Somewhere you don't expect to use it, yes. And so whether or not you actually do it and whether or not you want to do it at that time becomes weird and everything like that. So now that we're actually out of the more control area, we should probably talk about the design of the levels in single player. The design of the levels is okay for some of it. There are a fair few bad areas though. So one example of this bad design is there's a section where you're sneaking past a whole bunch of soldiers, and on Tactical Vision there was a bit where it told me to avoid. There was a heavy enemy vehicle there with a cannon on it. Now I found a rocket launcher earlier on. So whilst it's, oh, you need to avoid this, I thought, I don't need to avoid that, I can shoot it, I've got a rocket launcher. And I did it, and I blew it up, and that was all great. So where's the problem with that, you ask? Turns out that was parked in a narrow passageway, which you need to go through later, once you've effectively hijacked a vehicle elsewhere. So I hijack the vehicle, and I come to it, and it doesn't despawn or anything, it seems. It just stuck there in the middle of this door which you need to go through. So I ended up having to kill all the other enemies so I wasn't shot at, and then just constantly reverse drive into it until I could squeeze past it. So having it so that you can potentially block your path later on is silly. Another thing with the design in the game is the waypoints telling you where you need to go to. There are several times where you head directly in the direction of one of the waypoints, and then you get met with this large concrete wall. So you need to get past this wall, and to do that you need to effectively backtrack along this wall for quite a while to then find this hidden entrance. Why they couldn't set a waypoint at the entrance that you need to get to then get to the next bit, I don't know. No, instead they put it behind this wall, which is a fair bit out of the way. And there are several times where the game suggests maybe you go this direction, but you shouldn't, and it was this other direction, and you sort of get lost. This isn't something that only happens once in the game. This happens a fair few times throughout, and sometimes you sort of get blocked off by things that have happened, and there isn't a sort of way you know where to go. Also, there are things like doors, some of which you can open and can't open, but they look identical. Overall, the single player, the story isn't that great. There are a few weird design choices with energy. Design isn't too good either. It does look good, but the main problem is that the abilities and stuff don't seem to gel that well together, especially with the upgrade system. One of the things this game, because you're in a superpowered suit, it makes you want to feel completely overpowered in a way, but it doesn't make you feel overpowered. It's like, oh yeah, superpowered suit, go invisible, just get everyone. They can't touch me. I'm invincible. Doesn't really happen. You certainly feel pretty vulnerable for a guy in a supposedly superpowered suit, and it certainly seems more fun playing on the lower difficulty levels. So multiplayer, this is going to be short. Why is this going to be short? Multiplayer, I could maybe describe as being half dead at the moment. I did buy the PS3 version originally. This version I used this time around was the Xbox version. And the first time I tried joining a game, I couldn't find a game. I tried later at a more appropriate time, I guess. Eventually I found a game in pretty much a standard game mode. I doubt you're going to have any luck really on the other ones. So in a way I'm partially on the basis of when I played it almost a couple of years ago. Or even more than a couple of years ago, because I mainly played the beta, because when I actually had the actual game, PSN went down. And I'm going to say that multiplayer was pretty enjoyable. I really did enjoy it. I liked the concept of there being invisibility and stuff, all the various things you can do. Large jumps in the air, sprinting. There seemed a fair room for tactical options you could do. This is, I should say, the type of game where you need a good TV. Because invisibility is a armor option. So you're going to have tons of people being invisible. They're not too hard to see, but I have a pretty bad TV and keeping track of them at times, bit meh. So if you have really bad TV, it's maybe not the type of game where you'll have much success. But one of the real surprising things is that all the components, all the abilities seem to gel really well for the multiplayer. It's a bit weird how the multiplayer gels better than the single player does. The single player was developed by Crytek Frankfurt, and the multiplayer was also made by them, but with the assistance of Crytek UK. So the fact that it was a collaborative effort for the multiplayer should mean that it would be a bit more disjointed than single player, but it's the exact opposite. The multiplayer works pretty much as you'd expect from a multiplayer. It works pretty well. But one of the aspects I sort of like about it is how they do kill streaks. Now, whether or not there should be kill streaks in games is, I suppose, a different thing, but the way they do it is that you need to collect dog tags from enemies that you've killed. Now, this is good because it pretty much prevents camping. You can stay in the same bit, I suppose, and just pick people off. You're not going to get kill streaks for it, though, because you need to go up to their dead bodies to get the dog tags. So it's a really good way of doing anti-camping. I think that's pretty much all I can say for multiplayer, simply because I didn't really have a chance to play it this time round. It was fun from memory at least, but it's pretty much dead, so So now that we've covered it all, do I recommend the game? I wish I could. As I said before, I really did like the multiplayer when I first had it. But with that being dead and the single player, I wasn't really interested in it back then. Still not really now, so I can't recommend it. I guess if you want Crysis 2, get Crysis 3. Because from what I've heard about Crysis 3, it has fixed some of the things I've talked about. It's fixed the sprint, it's fixed the shooting while invisible. You've got the bow in Crysis 3, so you can shoot while invisible. I'd expect the multiplayer to be roughly the same. Maybe slightly more refined, but certainly not worse. So maybe check out Crysis 3. I'll probably need to do a review on it at some point or another. But yeah, this has been Level Replay. And I've got a sore throat, and I'm tired, and I've got a cold.